I just know I'm not doing that. There is no way I am doing that.
Live from the Willie Nelson and Friends Museum Showcase in Nashville, Tennessee. It's Music is Funny. Musicians talking to comedians about music and comedy. With your hosts, Raylan Nelson and Jonathan Bright.
Still smoking, I'm so high, I keep toking, I'm drunk, but I'm still drinking too.
Hi, everybody. I'm Raylan Nelson.
I'm Jonathan Bright from the Raylan Nelson Band.
Welcome back to Music is Funny. Hey, before we get started, I want to tell you guys that we're playing May 13th and 14th in Woodstock, Georgia. I'm going to play solo May 22nd in Pascagoula, Mississippi. May 28th in Memphis, Tennessee. June 25th in Louisville, Kentucky. And June 26th, South Pittsburgh, Tennessee. So come see us live if you can. Fantastic.
Things are opening back up. Anyway, got another great episode today. Got another long lifer, been in comedy over 20 years. Got to start in the New York stand-up scene.
Yeah, his first comedy gig was with Greg Giraldo.
Yeah, they both had their first gigs ever together. So that was a very interesting story.
Yeah, he's a really sweet guy. He makes bread. He does. He has 2 radio shows. And
yeah, he's toured with Jerry Seinfeld. He's done movies with Robert De Niro. On top of the radio shows, there's NPR.
Yeah, he's on NPR. There's so many good stories in this one. And stick around for the end because there's a great Papa Willie story there.
Yep. So,
without further ado, a Tom Papa. Tom Papa, I'm so excited to talk to you.
Likewise.
Oh my God, we did a whole episode with Jim Florentine and it didn't record. So
oh God.
On panic mode every time we start one of these things.
Oh, early podcast modes. It's amazing.
Exactly. Have you lost any? You've done a lot.
Yeah. When I first started like messing around with the other versions, it was just nonstop. We can't hear you. The other guy's not recorded right. The levels are wrong. And then everybody gets real snotty about it. At 10 minutes and 30 seconds, it dips out. Stop chewing.
Right. Yeah, we're starting to gain a foothold because we're getting our first negative comments coming in through the comment section. So that's always exciting.
That's how you know you're reaching people.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's just kind of get into it. What kind of music fan are you? Are you casual? Did you get into it as a kid?
Yeah. What's the first music you remember loving?
My first album that I ever received was C.W. McCall.
Wow.
Convoy.
Yep.
And it was a big hit at the time, was Convoy, and then there was like one other song that was kind of listenable, and then the rest of the album just puzzled little Tom.
Come on back to Rubber Ducky.
Yeah, right. But yeah, no, I've been a big music fan my whole life, pretty heavily.
Were your parents playing C.W. McCall or?
No, my father used to crank. He used to crank Joe Cocker.
Yeah.
Sly and the Family Stone.
Nice.
And what else was another big one with him? Oh, not Little Richard. James Brown. He was a big James Brown fan.
It's a far cry from C.W. McCall.
I know. I was trying to draw him slowly to country, and he was like, he wasn't having it. And I remember him like laying on the living room floor, and he'd have his headphones on because then he could really crank it without my mother being annoyed.
I remember the headphone days, staring at the album cover and listening to it with the headphones on.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And so your mom wasn't into that type of music?
No, I don't remember my mother being that into music, really.
Okay.
Yeah, she wasn't. No, he was the music, and he was really into it. I remember like he had 8 tracks, and he was always buying stuff, and Boz Scaggs and Chuck Mangione, and I'm just picturing all the things when I was nauseous in the back of his sedan.
Right.
I would hear Boz Scaggs playing over and over, and then with 8 tracks, it would cha-chung and go to the next track. Yeah, but my mother wasn't really that musical, she was funny, but she wasn't into music.
Did you hit a teenage year where you were sort of rebelling against your parents' music or your dad? Your dad had great taste in music, just to say. But as a teenager, as some of us often do, it's like, that's not my thing. This is my thing, you know?
Yeah, no, he kind of protected himself by listening to some like really cool stuff. So it was like it wasn't really much a rebellion against. He had a motorcycle. He was, you know, we grew up in northern New Jersey, but he had a very rebellious streak to him. Even though he had like corporate jobs and stuff, he was always on a motorcycle. He always like would be playing like really cool music. Like he was definitely. He wasn't someone that as a kid I was like, screw that, I'm going in another direction.
Right.
Because he had me pinned. He had me.
Yeah. It's
he was
hard to
listening to
rebel.
the Stones and he's listening to Led Zeppelin and I'm like, no way, I'm going to Barbra Streisand. I'm going to
Right.
show you.
It's like having a cooler older brother's record collection.
Yeah, completely.
Yeah, that's cool. Go ahead.
Oh, wait, I just wanted to say before we get too far,
Okay.
I forgot to introduce us to you.
Oh.
And I feel like maybe you should edit this out, but I'm Raylyn, and this is my guitar player, Jonathan Bright, and we all call him JB. And we're at my grandpa's museum right now. And I just feel weird that we didn't introduce ourselves to you because we actually just feel like we know you because we watch you all the time.
That's a weird thing. Do you get that as a comic? Because when we talk to people, again, we've spent hours on the road listening to stand-ups and listening to podcasts. It kills tons of hours in the van. But we
Yeah.
always end up feeling like we already know you guys,
Yeah.
especially since the podcast, because you get to kind of know you guys a little better than just the stand-up.
Yeah.
So-
yeah.
And I've asked some of the other guys, like, do you get people, maybe not so much you, but I would imagine some of those like tough crowd era comics get people coming up on the street just busting their balls out of nowhere because they think they know them and like, we're buddies. Hey, you're fat.
Yeah, and as you find, like when you do your podcast, like I have in my radio shows and stuff, and it's like there is an intimacy to the relationship that you're not aware of. You know?
Yeah.
No, I get it. But I did my research. I know who you guys are.
Okay. Especially, I listen to you guys when I'm taking showers and doing stuff around the house. So you guys do all that stuff with me.
Oh, that's good. I hope I hope it helps.
Yeah.
And we've had to wean ourselves off. We're staring at a computer screen, much like we do when we listen to podcasts.
Or watch them
Yeah.
on
So when
YouTube.
the partner's talking, you're just kind of like,
Yeah, you kind of
staring at
zone out.
as if we're just watching a podcast, It's
Hilarious.
the same visual.
I know. I was I literally when you first reached out, I was looking at my schedule and I was like, when am I going to be in Nashville and come see you live?
Yeah.
So we'll have to do part 2 that way.
Absolutely.
Yes.
So let's get into comedy. Like, did you want to be a comic as a young kid? I know you.
Yeah.
I know when you went to college, you did some acting and stuff. But was comedy like in the back of your mind from the get-go?
Yeah, comedy. I learned that comedy could be a profession when I was in 7th grade. I listened to my friend's older brother was listening to Let's Get Small by Steve Martin.
Oh yeah.
And we were just sitting in this crowded room, and it was all like little older kids, probably 5 years older, and they were all laughing. And I was funny. Early on, but I didn't know, like, it didn't click in my head that it could be a job. Like, you could be an adult and still be funny, and that's how you make your living. And then I heard George Carlin's album that same week, at the end of the week, at my other friend Joe's house. We were in his basement. We were listening to Class Clown, and it just clicked, and I was like, "Oh, that's what I'm gonna do. I'm funny. I'm surviving. I'm making all these people laugh. I'm just gonna keep going in that direction and get there somehow." So I knew I was pretty focused. So, but then I went to school. My parents were like, "You should get a degree just in case," and it was kind of made sense. I was scared enough to be like, all right. So I went to a school that had a pretty good acting program and didn't have any sports because I was an athlete when I was a kid. And I specifically went to a school whose football team was disbanded. They got in trouble. and there was no more football on the campus.
So there's no chance of you having to play football.
There was no chance of me having to play football, but they had a theater department. And I was like, all right, I'll go there. But then when you act, like you're acting, and I still always had stand-up. I would record stand-up. I would write stuff. But and then when I got out of school, I realized people had to hire me to be an actor, but I could just go show up at an open mic and do stand-up. And then and that's when I did it.
Yeah, I got, not to get too off subject, but you mentioned Steve Martin, and I got his records as a kid too.
Yeah.
And I got maybe half of the jokes. I was too young to even, years later, I could hear my parents cackling in the back. But, Grandpa bought a rubber. I had no idea.
No, I used to walk around the house singing that to my family. Grandpa bought a rubber, because it just sounded, it's just the way it went was so great. And I had no idea what he was saying.
Yeah.
I didn't know what a rubber was.
Exactly. So you're doing acting in college.
Yeah.
Did you have any thought? I know you say you always wanted to do comedy, but did you leave college and try and get acting gigs first, or did you go straight from college to comedy?
A little bit. I didn't really know what to do. I had no one in my life that went into the arts at all. And I had a big family, but there was no path of anything other than a businessman or a construction guy, there was none of that. So but I knew I had an interview in New York at an ad agency, and this guy was sitting in this cubicle or this small office, and he was very unhappy, and he was very mean, and he was asking me what I want to do, and I was like a junior in school, and I drove up, I put a suit on, and I was late, and I drove up, and I sat in this guy's office, and I'm all sweaty, and I'm looking across the table at this guy, and he's being kind of obnoxious, trying to ask me hard questions and stuff, and I was like, wait a minute, so try and get to the city, try and get this job, try and to what? End up like this guy? He's so unhappy, he's stuck in this office, and I was like, there's no way I can do this, and I literally drove back down to my school because I went to school in New Jersey. And drove back down and changed out of all that stuff and ran to rehearsal. And I was like, it was so clear. I don't know where I don't know if it's going to be comedy, if it's going to be, if I'm going to be an actor. I just know I'm not doing that. There is no way I am doing that. So when I got out, I kind of I auditioned for little stuff and community stuff and took some classes in New York, and but not that much. It was pretty soon after, a year after I graduated, that I looked in the Village Voice and saw if I brought a couple friends who would sit in the audience, I can go on stage, and so it was June 12th, 1993 was my first spot.
So how did that first spot come about? Did you hear on the street, oh, there's open mics, and you just went down?
No, I got the Village Voice, which is the New York, the cool paper of everything that was going on.
Right.
And I saw there was an ad for the New York Comedy Club, and it said, call this number if you want to, do an open mic kind of thing. And I called it, and I booked they said, just bring 3 friends. They have to pay the cover charge and 2 drink minimum, and we'll give you 5 minutes. And the show's June 12th at 5 in the afternoon. It was before all the other shows. And I remember hanging up the phone and being like, oh, I have a gig. There's a date now, a month from now, I'm going to be on stage telling jokes. And I went and I did it, and that was it.
I would imagine it's a lot like when you start a new band. You pretty much play your first gig before you're ready. You just have to book something and get that one out of the way.
And isn't that the way your whole career? It's people call and they're like, you just say yes, and then we'll figure it out.
It's can you play for 4 hours? Sure. We know 30 minutes of music, but yeah, we'll figure it out. We'll play Louie for 2.5 hours, Yeah. It's the same kind of thing. So had you been...
I have a question. Hold on. Well, do you remember the first joke that you wrote?
Yes.
Do you mind sharing it with us?
Sure, I'll share it. It's not great, but it's pretty good. Like, it had the structure of a joke. And I had actually like written the stuff out and was like going to try it. And the first one that I told that like that kind of hit was at the time they were handing out one of the news stories, they were handing out condoms in schools. And I said they're handing out condoms in grade schools now. When I was in 3rd grade, you needed 3 notes and a blood test just to get a ride on the bookmobile.
It's pretty good.
It's pretty good. Yeah. And it worked. Like they laughed when I stopped, and I was like, okay.
Oh, I nailed it. So
Yeah.
before that first gig, had you been for months going, I'm going to be a stand-up and working on material? Or was it sort of just like seeing the article or the ad and booking it and then like, oh gosh, I got to come up with stuff to say now that I have a date? Like, were you writing the whole time? Jokes?
It wasn't like really right. I didn't know how to do it,
Right.
you know, but I had a security job where I would have to sit in my car all night and outside of like a housing development. And nobody was robbing the place. So I just had to sit there for hours. And I would record stand up on my, on a voice recorder. And it was terrible, I'm sure. And I came back and played it for my friends and they didn't laugh. But I was thinking jokes. Like I was thinking this, like, cause I was always really funny, but I would never, and I had no idea like how to kind of like deliver an act or like how many jokes does it take to get through 5 minutes or any of that stuff.
A lot.
But when I had, but when I had the date, it was just like, I would just type it out on my little computer and was trying to get the jokes. But I mean, it's very telling that I only remember that one joke.
That was the one big laugh of the night.
Yeah, I can imagine what some of the other stuff was.
Did I hear that your first show was with Greg Giraldo was on that same bill?
Yeah, that's why I met Greg. I walked in. It was upstairs from the New York Comedy Club, which is upstairs from this Western bar in New York, like on 23rd Street. And it's since moved. But so you walk through this Western bar and then you go upstairs and there was this comic Gary on stage. He was hosting. My friends were like the only people in the audience. It was like my group, which was probably like 6 people and then another 2 maybe in the room. That was it. And Greg Giraldo was sitting there waiting to go on. A little baby-faced Giraldo, no beard. Nervous, so nervous and sweaty. And I was like, he kind of like scared me because I was like, what's going to happen? Like, why are you so nervous?
Maybe I should be sweating. And yeah.
Yeah. I was like, we're going to do this. It's going to go great. And he was just like a wreck. And we became friends immediately and just kind of hit it off. And we were friends ever since.
Yeah, he was one of my favorite. And I heard that he worked kind of clean at the beginning. I forget who was telling me that. I was like,
yeah, kind of clean. Yeah, like he never really had a lot of like real sexual stuff. He did not want to censor himself in any way. He thought that was kind of a passé to worry about bad words. He really didn't think, he thought that the culture had moved beyond that and he wasn't going to try and censor himself. But you know, that we had that conversation, it probably was a little bit of a transformation of him thinking maybe he should work a little clean or trying. We all kind of figure that stuff out early on. But his jokes, he had some funny jokes about these are like in the open mic days. His big jokes were about the Catholics and the Protestants, and that the only difference between them in Ireland, like the only difference between them is that the Catholics had to kneel during church. They had to kneel and stand, and then he'd do an Irish accent. You kneeling bastards, kneel, sit, stand, kneel, sit, stand. And he would kill with that one. And then he had a very funny one about, do you remember the show Fantasy Island?
oh yeah.
With Little Tattoo.
Yep.
was the little guy, and he had some joke about that, and he would do tattoo. It's so funny to think of Greg Giraldo doing tattoo imitations. But they killed.
And he was a smart guy, wasn't he?
Too smart. I really think that's what kind of did him in. I think he I think he was one of those people that saw things too clearly, and his brain never turned off, and he needed relief from that, I think. And I think that's what started him trying to slow his brain down, with other with other substances and stuff. And I have the gift of being just dumb enough to be happy.
Right.
And he
You
didn't
seem
have
like
that.
a happy guy.
Yeah, he didn't have that. Too
He didn't-
smart's dangerous.
He didn't suffer fools very well either. It seemed like he was just on that level of, like you're talking about, super intelligence and just can't understand why things are the way they are.
Yeah, and he was courageous. He was brave. He was brave in his soul. Like he would confront people if people gave him shit. If I remember, like the handful of times that there was trouble at the Comedy Cellar out on the street where a fight broke out, and something happened. Like we'd be talking and he would run right to it. Like and I'd be like, should we check out who's involved first before we go out there? And he was very honest, very brave, and very smart.
And very funny.
So we've had people when we do shows, we've had people tell us that we weren't good enough to talk in between our songs and stuff. How do you deal with hecklers from the crowd?
I usually kind of kill them with kindness. I don't feel like there's most hecklers you can handle because you've got a microphone, you're funnier, you're faster, you're not drunk. So they really don't stand a chance. But I try not to provoke them and make them feel hurt in any way, because then they want to keep fighting and then they keep coming back. So
Yeah.
I'll just try and destroy them without them realizing. I'll do it where it's over and they're like, oh, okay. The worst hecklers, though, are middle-aged, wealthy white women
I've heard that.
who are drunk. That group has never been told to be quiet. They think that every party is their party. And if they start, it's like you might as well just get the bouncer to take them out or wrap up the show, because they're not going to stop. There's no beating that.
Well, you talking about the way you handle hecklers. Your personality seems to be a bit different than that whole, I'm generalizing here, but that whole New York comedy scene, especially back then, was rough edge, ball busting, all that kind of stuff. Did you feel kind of out of place with your personality being around those guys, or was it just we're all comics, we do this? I mean, did you feel like, talking about Greg maybe going a little cleaner, did you feel that you needed to edge anything up outside of your personality when you started? Was that something you've
A
even
little
thought
bit.
about?
I always got a sense that I wasn't as cool as a lot of those guys. Not so much my peers, but the people who were like right before me, who were like the class ahead of me, like Dave Attell and Kevin Brennan and Nick DiPaolo and like that.
Colin Quinn.
But, yeah. I mean, I wouldn't call Colin cool, but I would call the rest of them.
I got you.
But yeah, I didn't, a huge thing is, when you're trying to develop your own thing, is the most important thing is to not care about what anybody else is doing. And
That's the hardest thing to do as a youngster too.
very difficult, because you're around them. You want to be liked by them. You want to be a part of the club. You're watching them kill. You want to do it too. And you're seeing what works. And should I be trying that? And it takes a while. And it's hard. But it really, and I went through a period, not long, but a period at the Comedy Cellar where I was trying to be a little edgier, like I was telling dirtier jokes, or was like leaning against the wall, like smoke. Like I didn't smoke, but be trying to be one of those guys,
Right.
not give a shit kind of an attitude, something that wasn't me. Like it was Attell or Nick DiPaolo, and the audience knows immediately that that's not you. So thankfully, it didn't work for the week or two that I was going down there.
Maybe I'll go back to what I was doing.
Yeah. Like even if, like I don't really curse that much in my everyday life. So even if I were to drop like F-bombs in my set, you could just feel the audience be like, "Aw, look at you trying to
Isn't that cute?
curse." Yeah. So there's that. Yeah, there was definitely that. But socially and like, it never felt like that. It was they were excluding you. You know, it was always, as long as you were really funny, you got into the fraternity. You know, that was really the barometer. Like if you were really funny, people respected you, and then you got to hang, and then you became friends, and it kind of went from there.
Yeah. And that's what's funny about, you talk about the cool guys. You hear a lot of them talk about how difficult it is to work clean. And maybe maybe it's difficult for them because they have to go against their personality, which isn't clean. And the same way it would have been difficult for you to try and get dirty, but they all talk about, man, it is hard to do clean comedy and get laughs. So you probably got a lot of respect for just being able to get laughs doing that, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And it is hard. It is hard. It's not as you don't have the words or the subjects that provoke and make people shift in their seat immediately. So you have to come at it. It has to be more potent, I think.
Well, it had to be a bit validating when you started. I know you've worked a bunch with Jerry Seinfeld. So working on the same kind of, I kind of picture you guys as the same sort of comedians as far as like real craftsmen, sitting down, writing out jokes, beats, just not really a lot of meandering around. How did you meet him and how did that whole thing come about? Because it seemed like it was sort of a match made in heaven. It had to make you feel great for him to, recognize what you're doing and pick you up and take you along.
Yeah. It's always important when I'm sure you've been through it where someone you admire likes you, right?
Yeah.
That's great.
Has that happened to you guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it validates, and it's like, especially if it comes at a time where you're kind of lost in the woods, it's like, okay, this person went the same way. This is some kind of guidance. And meeting him, I met him in New York at Stand Up New York. He came in like 2 nights in a row while I was on stage. I happened to be there, and he came in, and I saw him and tried to impress him and tried to do jokes different from that he saw the night before. And it worked. I came off and he said I was really funny, and he didn't know a lot of people in the clubs at the time. All his friends were gone except for Colin, and he had no one to hang with. So he thought I was funny. I was kind of his style of a comic, and then the biggest thing was just don't be annoying. don't. And it was kind of a cool thing because I didn't watch a lot of his show in those like last several years because I was out trying to be a comedian, and you weren't taping a lot of stuff. And so I wasn't, while he was huge, I wasn't like intimidated to talk to him. I was just interested in talking about comedy and stuff like that. So I think it made me relax a little bit where everyone else was freaked out around him. So it was just really just don't be annoying and try and hang on to his coattails as long as you can.
Yeah. And I'm sure just kind of soaking up knowledge from him, from the business, joke writing, all that stuff. Because he knew all of it, All of it. He's and he's so proud to be a comedian. Like he really, if I ever want to feel, I call him the comedy chiropractor, because you call him and he just adjusts you, and you're like, oh, right. It's whatever anxiety, whatever troubles, it's all kind of gone. It's like you appreciate how lucky we are to be comedians, and he always preaches that. So he's definitely, to this day, is like valuable that way.
Yeah.
Then you can appreciate a guy like that knows his comedy. He's a historian, clearly, as far as, like I said, as far as structure, writing out, craftsman, you can tell all that. When I was a kid watching comedy, I just thought you guys stood up there, rambled, and cracked wise, and everybody laughed. And I saw that round table on HBO years ago with, I think it was Louis C.K., Seinfeld, Chris Rock, and maybe Ricky Gervais, just sitting around talking about comedy and listening to Louis talk about him writing stuff out. It was like a revelation. I'm like, wow, this mumbling guy, all the mumbles are written out. It's all time. That's why it's so funny. You know, it's completely planned out. It was a mind.
It's a fake. It's all a fake.
But that is difficult, I would think. I mean, there is a true art to be able to write something down and be funny with the words that you have pre-planned. It's just, it's witchcraft almost.
Right. Like music is to us.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of writing a song?
Yeah, I've thought about it.
Have you ever written a song?
No.
You play anything?
I have a couple guitars that I attack once in a while with big fat chords. It doesn't get really much further than that.
And clearly you don't take it up on the stage. We heard that's a no-no. Nobody wants to follow or see the comedian with the guitar.
Yeah, everyone's very uncomfortable with whatever kills before them.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's kind of the true music as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I could have done that.
Oh, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No.
Backing up to when you first started. So there was a show that we had to play to nobody. It was basically the people who were working the festival. Have you ever had to do a show with no audience?
Yes.
Oh,
yeah, plenty.
It's horrible, right? What was it like for you?
So bad. One of the worst ones I played Rutgers University.
Yep.
And it was in a food court. Like it was late at night in a food court where there was like a Pizza Hut on one side, like a cafeteria, and then on the other side was like a Taco Bell and like whatever the school stuff was. And there was no one in there. There's literally no one in there. And they said, well, it starts at 8 or 9, whatever it was, and you have an hour. I was like, really? Can you just pay me and let me go home? And they were like, nope. So I just got up there, and as kids would roam in to get a snack in between studying for their finals, there's this man on stage desperately, hey, what are you doing? Where are you?
I was about to
Where
say,
are you from?
Probably makes crowd work kind of difficult.
Yeah, nice shirt. Like they're being assaulted by this inappropriate person on stage.
One-on-one attack.
Yeah. They were like, no one stayed. Everyone just get left. It was horrible.
So I bet those early years, there were probably a year or two where you probably did comedy almost every night.
Yeah, well, not in the very first years. In the very first years, it's kind of, you don't get many.
Well, yeah.
Like you get those bringer shows. They would call them bringer shows, like I was explaining before. And you'd get one a month, in the beginning. And it took a while to find you're so desperately want to find the shittiest gigs on earth.
Yeah.
But it was hard. Like, you do, and then you had your day job or whatever you were doing with your life, and you'd, another 3 months and you get up again. And, it's slow in the beginning.
Yeah.
But then like when it kicks in, like I started hosting a lot of shows, like the clubs would see me in those shows, and then they put me on the regular shows to host. And then it started to move quickly. And then it's every night. Then it's every night for like, I don't know, 10 years. Just running around New York, doing multiple shows a night, every single night. That was the goal. Like if you had a night off, you felt like something was wrong. Mm-hmm. And you work desperately to get to that point. And then once you do, that's it. You just don't, you just never stop.
Is it hard to write when you're doing those, like you took those early days when you're just doing comedy every single night? Or I guess you can get material from the crowds, but if all you're doing is working the shitty day job, going and doing comedy back and forth, did you run out of a subject matter? Did you have to take a break to maybe,
No, that part, if the more you're working, the easier it is to write, because you can always be rewriting. You tried that joke out on stage. Some things worked, some things didn't. You can go back and you have another show that night, so you're editing quickly and then bringing it back up, and it's like this machine starts rolling, and that's easy. And then it feeds off each other, and there's all that other stuff. It's when you don't have gigs, like during this last year, I'd continue to write, but you can only write so much without going on stage and trying it, because that's the whole nother editing part of the process. I need to bring it up, have people respond, say it out loud, have people. So without that, like at a certain point, you just had to stop the writing for stand-up because you weren't telling jokes.
Yeah. And plus you need stuff to happen in life, and not that there wasn't things happening, but for our immediate, it was just our house and watching whatever we were watching. And I haven't written anything in like 7 months or since before COVID. What was that, a year ago? Because nothing's happening.
You can write songs about being locked down or a virus, but it's not.
How many COVID songs does the world want?
It's like COVID jokes. It's going to be hack in 6 months anyway. So
yeah.
that kind of thing.
But I found that you could write about there's a bunch of stuff of like writing about being with my kids or being trapped with my house, or like there were consequences of it that I think if you took COVID out, you could still live with that material. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, that makes sense.
Yes.
Sleeping, next to my wife every night. I saw it in a different way because I was home. I wasn't on the road. So there's like a whole chunk of that now that you don't have to know that it came from lockdown, right?
Yeah.
But it can still survive. But it was tricky for sure. And also the other part that was difficult was we forget now, like the brain is so crazy, but the first 6 months of it was like, are we going to survive? Are we going to? Yeah. Are we all going to get this? Are we getting it from our packages? Are we getting it from? Or are we going to make it? That's not really a space to create.
Not a lot of comedy buried in there.
Yeah.
But but to your point, I think it seems like a lot of your comedy, it's not all about family, but it comes through like a familial eye. Like it seems like a filter that goes through your comedy. Even if you're not talking about family, it comes from sort of that place, and seems like it always kind of has.
Yeah. No, that's definitely where I live, and it's so funny because I've been doing it for 23 years or whatever, and this tour that I'm about to start is called the Family Reunion Tour, and I just felt like I'm always kind of like, it is what you said, but then I'm always throwing other stuff in, and I'm like, but I'm different than that. I do other things, but there is that thing. It is that, and it's the family that I live with. It's the family that I came from. It's the family of the community. It's the family of our country. It is all through that lens. So finally, after 23 years, I'm putting family on the poster.
It's very relatable to everyone too, to have perspective.
Yeah.
And I thought it was cool. Your last special, you got away with, and I love comics, like Bill Hicks and Doug Stanhope that talk about things that are happening in the world and the dire consequences. It's almost nihilistic. Like, what are you going to do? Blah, blah, blah. You address a lot of the same, especially in the new stand-up, a lot of the same kind of subject matter, but it's funny and it's on a positive tip. It's not like the world is fucked and we're all going to die. It's like, these things are unavoidable and it's cool. Everybody goes through them. We're all doing fine,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't like hopelessness.
No, me either.
I don't like it. I think it's a waste of time. There's two ways to go. You could be hopeful or you could be hopeless, and you're here. Yeah. What's the point of making this a shitty ride? Like, right? It should be, enjoy it as much as you can and try and see the bright side and what's the option is what? Walk around miserable and just abuse yourself and make more misery. I don't buy it. I see it as a complete waste of time.
Yeah, you got to choose to be happy.
You do, and you can. And it's not easy, but you can. You totally can. And now look, there's some comedy extreme versions where you can't. I get it. There's people that struggle in ways that, we're fortunate to not have that brain chemistry. But for the majority of people, you can turn it around, or at least do your very best to try. To try. Yeah, exactly. You're in a much better place.
stuff that happens to all of us where we can't get out of that mode for a while. But it just seems like once you start trying, it's easy to, it gets there quicker, you know?
Yeah.
Losing family members or whatnot can put you down for a while, but also, I mean, I remember when the COVID thing first started happening, and there was like a week where I just slept. And I was like, oh man, I have really got to get up out of bed, because I can see how people get depressed and never get out of bed. Because I realized we weren't going to play shows for inevitably, you know, and I got into this depressive, and I'm like, this isn't you. This isn't you. And I had to pull myself out of it.
I went through the same exact thing. I was the same. I was close to being in bed. I was just like moping around, going slow, tired.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, this is what being depressed is. Just, meh. And I was like, all right, it's time to snap out of it. And it took some doing. It took some exercise. It took some eating right. It took some work. But I felt the same thing. I was like, oh, right. There's nothing wrong with me. It's not that I'm fuzzy from smoking weed last night. I'm depressed. I'm like, you gotta snap out of it. I mean, I love, you know, darker, edgier comics, and like George Carlin was always like very much a realist of what was going on, and similar to Giraldo, it was almost too real and too accurate, and it's scary and it's disheartening. But he would always give you a little hope. He would always give you a little bit of, but we're going to be okay, and but you've got your family, or but whatever. And there was one special that he didn't do it. I think it's the one with all of the tombstones behind him. And it was an HBO special, and he was just bleak, 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 good night. And I was like, no, that's not good. It's not good. You got to have, it's okay to see all that stuff, but without the hope, then what's the point? And really, what is the point?
Yeah.
Well, with this positive attitude you have, I'm curious, is on your pathway up, was there ever a time you just bailed and go, you know what, this comedy shit is not going to work out, I'm going to try to do something different? Or once you got in, did you get in?
No, there was no option. There was no, it was never a like, what if, or maybe I won't. I was like, you know, maybe someone won't hire me, and some depressing times of, can I get on that show, or all that kind of stuff. But during that time, you're quietly doing it all the time and getting better. There was never like a give up or a plan B, or no, that didn't really exist.
Yeah, I was just curious. There was a time in my life early on, I've been playing music for probably 6 or 7 years, and I would kind of looked around. I was like, what is the point of all this? I'm chasing record deals. Well, this is never going to happen. I'm just going to not. And really about 6 months, I was a miserable bastard. And I'm like, well, I guess I've been unable to chew my leg out of the trap. But then you figure out this is kind of what I want to do. And the older you get, you sort of calibrate what success means. You know, I don't need a big mansion. I don't need this. It kind of comes down to, how can I play music and figure out a way to pay the bills doing that? And once you figure that out, you're almost everything past
I would
that's
say
a bonus.
that's success. Yeah.
Yeah. And that means you made the right choice, that you're content. It's not just being older. It's that you actually, the younger you went down this path, and you end up in a pretty decent place, regardless of what the check marks are, or the, you know, the checklist of stuff. It's like, you are a happy person at this age because you decided ultimately to go down that path. I had a moment where, the girl I was with, her father got really sick, and after I'd been with Giraldo for a couple of years, I had basically a year off where I stopped doing it because I felt like I needed to concentrate on money and taking care of her and make sure everything goes okay. And same thing, miserable, gained 30 pounds, was just playing video games with my pothead friends, drinking beer every night. And I remember realizing, I laid on my sister's bed, and I was like, am I even funny anymore? Like, what? This is, I'm literally doing something. I'm a fish that is trying to climb up a mountain. This isn't going to work. And I quickly went back, and everything was corrected.
Was
Yeah.
Greg giving you shit during this time? To like, dude, why are you not doing stand-up anymore? So
Calling me.
So if you took a year off and you guys were young, when you went back, had the people you started with made it a little further and you have to start kind of all over again, or did you just kind of slide back in?
A little bit. No, it was a humbling. It was a humbling thing. It was, no one was really exploding, but Gaffigan and Greg, and they were both, got their first little bite of whatever, or at least were like, had to really establish themselves in the clubs,
Right.
and I had to go to the Boston Comedy Club. I would take the train down to the Village because it was the only place that I could get on. And I had to go up and bomb in front of like horrible one or two people. And I had to just eat shit for, several months. And I went to this bar in New Jersey. I would go on Saturday nights. It was a comedy night, and it was just terrible. No one was there for comedy. They even had like the host of the show would heckle you from a microphone in the back of the room.
Oh my God.
It was humiliating, and I knew it though. I knew this was the price I had to pay to make my return. But I was happy to do it. Honestly, I knew without a doubt this had to be done, and I kind of made a mistake, and it was like I've got to get back into. It's like getting back into shape. It was like you can't just run back out on the field. You're fat now.
Right. So what was it like when you first got into the Comedy Cellar? I'm sure that was like hitting Mecca after all the stuff you'd been up. I'm sure that was the first initial goal, is just to get into that club.
Yeah, that was a big one because it was starting to really become a big thing at the time when I was coming in, and originally we played Uptown, New York, stand up New York, in the comic strip, which were Uptown in the Upper West, Upper East Side, and then all the way downtown was the Comedy Cellar down in the Village. And I remember watching guys like desperately trying to get off stage at the comic strip so they could race all the way down. And you didn't have money, you couldn't afford a cab. You had to like get trains or like something and get down there. And I remember watching guys and it's like, oh man, that's cool. They actually have another spot after this. Because we just do our comic strip spot and just drink and hang up there. And then finally I got through, and then that was so powerful down there that eventually it became the opposite. You're like, I'm not going uptown. I'm just going to stay here at the Cellar. This is where Chris Rock and all these great people are working every night, and this is like the place to be. And you could do multiple spots in a night. And there was a time when Giraldo and I both had motorcycles, and that's how we would do it. We both had bikes. And we would do our spot at the comic strip, get on our motorcycle, and go down. And one of us was always leading the other one. Like someone would have a spot at 9, and then I would buzz down, and he'd have a spot at 9:30. Then he'd buzz down, and we got to park our bikes both outside this pizza place. And I was like, "We're pretty cool right now."
That's when you felt like the cool guy right there. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you guys are dirty, but I ride a motorcycle.
Yeah. Attell smokes cigarettes, but he can't ride a bike.
There you go. So besides comedy, you do and have done a lot. Movies, NPR. Like, how did you get into movies?
Just auditioning. You want to try, and it's hard for people to know who you are as a comics until you have some other stuff. Especially when I was starting, there was no, social media. So there was like, you had to get in the big things. You had to audition for Letterman and audition for movies and audition for TV and all that stuff. So you just went after everything, commercials, whatever. And the first movie I got was Analyze That with Robert De Niro.
Yeah, that's not a bad first hit right there.
Yeah, it was. That was really exciting because I went to do the audition and I got the call back and got to go back for the second audition, and they met me outside and they're like, okay, so you're going to read the scene. It's like you're like a fiance in a jewelry store, and you're buying the ring from the clerk, and so you go in there. Harold Ramis is the director. He'll be there. I was like, oh, okay. He's like, yeah, and you'll read the scene. You and Bobby will read the scene. And I was like, okay. And I thought Bobby was like the script assistant or the temp or whatever. And I walk in and Bobby is Robert De Niro.
Wow.
I was like, oh, gee. So like, we start reading the scene, and I'm trying not to be nervous, and I've got these two legends right there, and I'm like, hey. And then he lost his place in the script. I'm like, really, like, and he's fumbling around, and it went from this weird feeling of being in awe of this legend, and then like, De Niro's going to make me lose this scene.
Dude, you're screwing up my audition.
Dude, you're screwing up. Who is this guy? Can
the
someone
other guy
replace
in.
Bobby, please? Somebody please replace Bobby. And then, you just try and keep it going, and it's not like I at least didn't have a lot of planning and all of this stuff. You just try and create things and then things come to you, and it's kind of that fielding of both of them. Like I'll write a book, or I'll write stuff and write scripts and what have you, and then and create my stand up for specials and late night shows, and then people come in and they're like, do you want to host this thing? Do you want to do this? And it's just kind of the main barometer is like, can I be funny in all of it? Am I still going to be myself? Will I be, is there something, if it's going to be me not playing a role, if it's going to be me, it's got to be funny. You know what I mean? I'm not going to get all pensive and talk to the Real Housewives.
Right.
And, yeah.
You've done a lot of writing too, I'm sure, for movie scripts and stuff like that. I'm sure you've done comedy writing. Are you kind of like me, where if you're writing, you want to do stand-up, and if you're doing stand-up, you maybe want to do a movie? I mean, I get a little ADD about maybe producing, doing stuff in the studio, and then like, I want to go out and play, and then you go out and play, and you're like, I want to get back in the studio. Is it because you do a lot of things? Is that how? I'm sure that's kind of satisfies a little bit of all the things you want to do.
Yeah, the thing I worry about more is that spreading it out too thin. Like I always think, like, what would happen if all this energy went to this one thing? Right. There's always being the comic and writing the jokes and telling them, but then there's also the writing for the books, and then there's writing for these articles, and then there's developing these scripts, and then there's going to act in this thing, and then there's hosting this podcast, and then there's hosting that radio show, and it's like, I try and manage it as much as I can so nothing suffers, but I always fantasize about what would this be like if it was just all just laser focused on this one thing. But after having this work habit, maybe you're right. Maybe I would get bored and be like, all right, I don't want to just do this.
Well, it's good to have options. That's for sure.
Yeah.
I ask every comedian who's been a guest on this show this question. What if I were to dress like you, learn one of your sets, and go out and be a Tom Papa cover comic? What are your thoughts on that?
I would love to see it, first of all. I would pay to see that.
Me too.
Yeah, you could probably get away with it. You could do it. Hopefully the jokes are written well enough that you'll be able to get a couple laughs off of it.
We've all thought it is an interesting dichotomy. Like, you can be a cover band, you can even be a tribute band and dress up like the band and go out and do it. But you just don't ever see
comedy. Yeah.
You came up with this idea because
you might see it, but you don't realize it because someone's lifted someone else's material.
Right.
That's a good point.
I was opening for Todd Snyder in Texas, and there was a guy that ran the club that we were playing, or it was a theater. He was a Mitch Hedberg. Sorry, Hedberg. Why do I always want to say Hedberg?
I don't know.
Are you sure? Can we just change it to Hedberg?
Well, for today, he's Mitch Hedberg.
You could do anything you want.
Yeah, there you go.
He's not complaining.
Yeah. He's not going to see you.
There was a guy doing his act, and it was basically just because he kind of looked like him, and he did look like him. But yeah, I never saw it. He just said he did it, and boasted and bragged about it, and the people in the town said, yeah, he does this. So that's what brought it up. And we do Joan Jett songs in our band. We do Loretta Lynn too, and I can get up there and pretend to be Joan, pretend to be Loretta, sing the song, the words they wrote, and it's okay. But if I got up and did your set, I would be blacklisted as a comic. comic.
Carlos Mencia.
Yeah.
Is that out loud? I'm sorry.
Yeah. I guess the only way you would get upset is if you became more successful at being me than I was at me.
The new hot Tom Papa. Tom Papa
Yeah,
with
exactly.
tits. Wait till you see this.
Yeah, and you start killing it, and I'm like just playing giggles in Omaha.
Maybe you could hire him as a writer once you get bigger than him.
I say go for it.
So how did NPR come about? I know you've got the voice for it perfectly, but you had to be a fan of the shows that
Mhm.
how did all that come to be?
Yeah, I was a fan of it all, and I always wanted to be on Wait, Wait, Don't Tell Me. I just always thought that was so funny, and I love the Paula Poundstone and those comics. Just all seemed so great, and I really wanted to be a part of that. And my agent just kept pushing and pushing and throwing my name in the ring, and eventually I got it. Who knows why they decided to say yes at a certain point, and then I did well enough where and now I go back pretty frequently and got to guest host it once when Peter was out for some reason, some medical thing, so they needed a host pretty quickly, and so I got to come in and host it, which was crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, not to
host
sound
like
too dumb, but was it a thrill going, wow, I'm hosting this show that I would imagine that would be pretty cool, you know?
So cool. I think I thought it was cooler than everybody else. I was just like, I'm hosting, and everyone's like, yeah, okay. And then the Live from Here part of it, which it started as the Prairie Home Companion. It was I always liked Garrison, and I always liked the Prairie Home Companion. He was so prolific, and I loved that space. I always say it's the only way I could describe it. He created this space, this environment on the radio of this Lake Wobegon and all of it. I really, really admired it. I always thought, though, that in the hands of comedians, if it was just pure comedy, his had more scope to it. I was like, in the hand of comedians, I think that would be such a cool show. Like, it was just going for hard laughs and like using comics rather than the musicians or the sketch stuff. And so anyway, I was inspired by him immensely. And then this opportunity came around when he was stepping down and Chris Thiele was taking it over. And my friend at Largo, Flanny, who runs Largo, Chris would play there with the Watkins family, and I was there as a comedian, and he introduced us. And Chris and I both had the same admiration for the show, and Chris needed a spoken word component, someone to handle that part of it. And I got hired to be the head writer and do a monologue on it. And it was so great. It was so much fun. Because as a comedian, you're just working by yourself all the time. And all of a sudden, I was touring around with all these great musicians and collaborating with all these people. And it really was a ton of fun. I really loved it. So that kind of gave me this introduction into the whole NPR world, which I always liked I always suspected I would like that environment and the audiences and everything, and it's kind of all panned out. Like it's a cool, not so ego-driven part of show business. You know what I mean?
Right.
Yeah.
Like you can relate to the audience. There's a connection there. Everybody kind of has a similar vibe. It's very positive, I find. So yeah, I was sad to see Live from Here go away, but I'm excited for whatever comes next.
Yeah, man, you were busy. And then you still do the Sirius radio show with Fortune?
Yeah, we do the Sirius XM, the What a Joke. We're coming up on 2 years already.
Wow.
Oh my God, really? Already?
I know. It's crazy. We just interviewed Ted Sarandos, who's the head of Netflix, and it was the 2-year anniversary today as we're recording this. It was the 2-year anniversary of the channel. And then Fortune and I started in July. So the 2 years already. Crazy.
Amazing.
A
Speaking
lot
of
of yapping.
you got a lot of talking to fill up between all your stuff. Speaking of Netflix, when you're doing specials now, is there any difference now doing specials with Netflix than it used to be, like our specials? Like, I know you probably get complete creative control. Do you, did you used to get notes when you would do maybe specials for other networks or anything? Has it become easier with Netflix as far as freedom and things like that?
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot more freedom. I don't think they gave you too much like at Comedy Central, those other places. Creatively, it didn't make that much of a difference, but the reach was just huge. You know, like we actually had a joke. We're joking that when you did a special on Comedy Central, you would have to tell everybody, watch it Friday at 10.
Yeah.
That's your only chance is to watch it Friday at 10.
Or buy
which
the
is
DVD.
so crazy. Yeah, because now you put it on Netflix and literally anyone that has Netflix anywhere on the planet can watch it whenever they want.
Yeah.
And that's insane.
I rewatched your specials this week because you were coming on. Yeah.
Thank you.
And
Did
it
you
is
laugh?
cool that you can go back and watch old
Yeah.
comedy specials. That used to be damn near impossible unless you own the DVD.
Yeah, yeah. And now YouTube too. You can just go down that and pull out anything. So yeah, Netflix changed everything. It really did. It just gave so much exposure to so many different people in so many different parts of the world. And yeah, it's one of those things that literally changed the form.
Right.
And now you can have a live stream special and sell tickets to everyone all over the world.
Yeah. But the only problem with that is you can only kind of do it once. You know, like I did one recently and I had put it off, and then I found this group, Rush Ticks, who really was doing it right. And I did one with them, and it was like, yeah, it was great. Like the response was good. Like a lot of people saw it. It was fun. But it was like, well, I can't keep showing the same material. So now I'm going to do something else with them where I'm going to be doing baking. I'm going to have like a baking competition in my kitchen and have people bake stuff, and I could just do crowd work.
Oh, yeah.
So you can have that presence, like you said, like to have the reach. But as far as doing the act, it was like, once and I'm out of there.
Yeah, we always talk about that between musicians and comedians. We spend a year making a record, and then we get to go out and do those jokes forever. Nobody wants to hear any
Yeah.
music. You guys spend all that time making a special, and you don't even really get to go tour it, you know, because
What's so crazy though, because it's like there is this kind of mix where these people, even if they saw your special, say they saw it once or twice, they don't really remember all of it, and they've never seen you do it live.
oh, that's a good point.
And there's a lot of fans that actually want it. Like whenever people come up after a show, they'll say, "Oh, we see you every time you come to town." And the comic in me is this, "Oh, did I show you some new stuff?"
Right.
And they always look at me like, well, it doesn't, what? No, we're here to see you. Like, it doesn't matter what you're doing. We just want to see it. Or they'll come up and say, why didn't you do the cat joke? It's like, well, that's from 10 years ago. Yeah, but we love that one. It's our favorite one. So I don't know. I mean, creatively, you have to keep moving forward, but I don't think that you have to have this policy of I'll never touch that joke again.
Right.
Right.
I must say on the new special, I don't know if you've seen this, but when we were talking to Jim Florentine, I was asking him if their subject matters now, not that it's taboo, but it's just not funny anymore. Just didn't get any laughs, not self-censorship, but just certain subjects are not funny. And he mentioned fat jokes as one of them that he's used to do, can never get a laugh anymore. So he moved on. However, my man, Tom, had a hilarious fat joke in his new special. Or
Yeah.
I don't want to ruin it, but I was like, hey, Jim's wrong because there's one this year that was hilarious.
Are you calling out Jim Florentine
I'm
right now?
just kind of calling out Jim right now.
Yeah. No, Jim should be called out. And I think that, what he's probably means, knowing Jim and coming up in New York together, he's probably just talking about mocking people for being fat. Like fat chick jokes were like, when I was starting, like it was always like waking up next to a fat chick, or like that sounds so awful now. Like, and everyone was making these horrible jokes about that at the time.
Yeah.
Those would not fly. But
That
us
your
talking
mom is
about
so
us as
fat jokes? Oh, go ahead.
yeah,
Ooh,
right,
those-
exactly. Yeah. Oh God, it was like, and now everyone's like, no, please. But if you're talking about it culturally, like I did, I think, I was able to get away with it. But that being said, I made, you take your phone and you take a picture of you from underneath, and it's just
God, yeah.
the worst. Yeah. I posted a picture of me with like 20 chins from that angle.
Yeah.
I made a fat joke. I got so much blowback on social. How you're fat shaming? How dare you? I'm like, it's my face. Those are my chins. You don't get to
Yeah.
say I'm fat shaming.
Or if your phone is on just the black screen like this and you're driving and it's in your lap and you happen to look down, the reflection of yourself, that view is the worst. Ever.
Brutal. Oh, that or the side view, the side catching like the profile from kind of the back. Oh.
How do you catch that? And think,
Oh God, there's no, if you should just walk with like blinders on so people just see what you see in the mirror.
I did hear that people think that you're 20% hotter than you think you are. I don't know if that's true.
Hotter?
Oh, really?
Yeah, people see you, well, you understood you, right? Everyone sees everyone 20% hotter than the person sees themselves.
That was probably
Oh.
a fat chick that said that.
Yeah, maybe so.
Yeah.
I don't. We got to talk about
Yeah.
baking because you mentioned.
Yeah,
you-
bread. How did bread come
Bread.
out?
If anybody hasn't seen it yet, Tom's got a podcast. I forget the name. Breaking Bread
Breaking
with Tom
Bread.
Papa,
Yeah.
I think,
Yep. Very
where
good.
he drinks good wine and eats good bread with other comics.
Yeah. Yeah, and anyone or bakers or and I just started. A friend of mine taught me how to do it. He showed me what a sourdough starter was. I had no idea that there was like this living culture that people made bread from for thousands of years.
Yeah.
And it's like because we grew up in a time when people were like, bread is evil. Like you shouldn't eat bread.
Mhm.
And I realized that there's something wrong with that. If we show up, we have money in our pockets, and now we're not allowed to eat it. That didn't make sense. And it was because we weren't making real bread anymore. We were making stuff with 50 ingredients in it. It was really not bread, but bread is flour, water, salt, and yeast. So I learned how to make it, and I learned how to get a starter going and made it for my family, and it was just so much better, and the process of it was great, and I just loved it. I loved I was creating this good thing, and I was getting better at it. I never, it was when I was writing my first book, so I was home a lot and had this routine where I needed to get up from the desk, and the next stage of the bread was kind of like, it just kind of all gelled. And it just kind of took off. And then I talked about it on Rogan. And once I talked about it on Rogan, who is just like this keto, nothing but elk and
Right.
protein, and I was shoveling bread at him and trying to break him down and have him eat bread. People just started asking me for advice, and it just kind of took off from there. And then, and now it's still just a huge part of my life. Like this morning, I was doing my radio show, and I had to have them hold for 5 minutes because I needed 5 more minutes. I got up at 7 to make sure I could get the bread done in an hour and a half, so I could take it out of the oven before we could start the radio show.
Is it the kind of thing where you're squeezing the mixture in a Ziploc bag for a few days? Is it that kind of starter?
It's not in a Ziploc bag, but
In a bag?
It's in like a mason jar. It's just like, it almost looks like a paste.
Yeah.
It's flour and water basically. Yeah. And there's yeast in there, and it just kind of bubbles up. So like when you're going to cook it, when you're going to bake, you take that out of the fridge, you take a scoop of it, like a spoonful of it, into a bowl, and then put more flour and water in it, and it starts to become active. The active yeast in there starts to cultivate, and it starts to bubble and grow, and then you feed it again, and after like a day, you've got this bubbly mass of yeast, and that is what you put in your final dough.
Okay.
Yeah, you just add flour, water, and salt to that, and you're making bread.
You got a circle of friends that now put in requests for bread.
Yeah, it was a great way to. Well, my neighbors are. Yeah, there's neighbors, and then there's friends, and then there's comedians.
Right.
And they all get the overflow of what I've got, and it kept me in touch with everybody during the pandemic, because you miss being around comedians and seeing people. So I would get in the car and drive to Ali Wong's house or drive to Bert Kreischer's house and spend like a half hour with them when we weren't seeing anybody. We were in harsh lockdown. And I would sneak out on the road. I was like, there was nobody out there. And I would be buzzing along, listening to music and bringing my bread delivery. And it kept me in touch with everybody. It was really like a cool a cool way to stay connected.
Yeah, and speaking of Rogan, this is a little off the subject, but you've done a ton of late night TV and all that kind of stuff. You've been on Rogan a bunch. Was there ever during the late night TV era a show that you could do that would have the reach of, because I mean, we talk about it now. Rogan's basically the new Tonight Show when Johnny was running it. If you get on there, you're going to get a huge reach. Was that one of the bigger things? Like, what was it like early on? What was the big show to get on, and how was that different than, getting on Rogan?
Yeah, there was like, Letterman and the Tonight Show were like the big ones.
Did they sell tickets for you? I know they would up your, people would see you, but did it translate into ticket sales or anything like that?
No, not with the impact of Joe. Like early Tonight Show before I started, like the other generation probably. But no, doing Joe was just like the reach was just huge. It's just he just hit so many people in so many different places, and that was the one like you actually felt it. Like, oh, there's a little bump when I come to town, and it's people that know about the bread because they'll yell stuff about bread from me being on Joe's show. No, I mean it was huge. Joe's show's huge,
and I'm sure the prep is way different than getting your 5 minutes or whatever together to go on Letterman and then go, well, I'm going to step into the ring for 3 hours and we're just going to be talking. And I would imagine you forget you're even doing a podcast about halfway through. I mean, you don't necessarily have to be careful what you say because of how you are, but I bet it's way different than going on a TV show.
Yeah, you do. You don't have to be careful about what you say, but you do know that anything you say, there's going to be the audience is so huge that it encompasses everybody.
Yeah.
So
somebody's going to get mad.
Someone's going to say that you're too left, or someone's going to say that you're too right, all in the same episode. People will say that you're this and you're that, and it's like they just are. There's just so many. Everyone has their own little thing going on. But like like we were talking about when we started off air, it's like, that's good though. That means that you'd rather have people complaining. That means like at least people are listening.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so before we let you go, I have to ask you about my grandpa. When's the first time that you remember hearing about my grandpa, and what's your own personal Papa Willie experience?
Man, oh man, what there's so much. He's like, he's like the background to your life. When I was like in probably like 6th grade, Georgia, I remember my friend and I had a cassette tape, and we were just like 6th, 7th grade, 2 dudes. But this song was so heartbreaking, and we would play it over and over. We just went through this moment in the summer. It was like our like moment to like let our emotions out. Like Georgia, just like
prepubescent.
Oh my God. Angst. Yeah, it just hit us so hard. And I don't even know what else was on that cassette, but then he always became like the barometer for what real country music was. Mm-hmm. So like the whole new era of, I'm sure, very talented people that don't have a little roots to them. I couldn't even listen to it. I can't listen to countryish, rockish kind of stuff because it's like, no, because Willie that's real. I met real country. That's what real country is. So this is like pop. I don't understand where you're going. Like, like Sturgill Simpson or some people like that are like, okay, they have enough roots in them where I can kind of show up.
Sturgill's
I got two other Willie things, but I would listen to all of it. It just became, forever. And then I got to host, as a young comic, I got to host Woodstock 99.
Oh, wow.
They brought a bunch of comics. I think Florentine actually might have been up there.
Before you get into that, how is it opening for musical acts like that?
We weren't opening. We were just, it was Rich Voss. Rich Voss was on the smaller stage.
Oh, so a side stage kind of thing.
Yeah, and I was on the main stage.
Gotcha.
And it was just literally, they didn't know what to, they just needed someone to go out and say, Kid Rock is next. Stuff like that.
I gotcha.
And they asked a couple of us to do it. So I got this crazy gig of like before James Brown came out to start the whole thing out. I'm pretty new, and I'm just out there like, you guys ready? And 100,000 people throwing water bottles at you and shoes and Kid Rock and Rage Against the Machine and Metallica. It was insane. And I remember it was several days, and the last thing on like the Saturday night was Metallica. And Metallica came in. All of us that were hanging on the stage during the Fugees and all these other bands, and we got to like sit on the wings. Metallica came, and they're like, get off the stage. Everybody out of here. If you're not Metallica, if you're not in the family, you're out. And they just kicked everybody out, and we couldn't, and they just went up there, and just played massive Metallica dark music into the night. And everybody was just like frazzled and went to bed, and it's just like under this Metallica cloud. And then Sunday morning, the first band up was Willie, and just comes out there, good morning, everybody, and just the little guitar, and it was just peaceful Sunday, and just woke everybody up and got the whole place going, and it was just filled with good vibes and good morning and just good. It was like, oh, it was such relief, and I got to sit on the side of the stage and watch the whole thing. Oh, it was beautiful. Such a beautiful moment. I'll never forget it. The power of him just with his guitar against the machine of that thing, was just, it was impressive. And then my sister got to go on the bus once when he was she's a big into farming and she runs this organization called City Green that helps like develop farms and give produce and stuff to inner city kids and stuff. It's like this cool organization in northern New Jersey. Cool. And somehow during some farming kind of thing,
Farm Aid,
they got, probably. I don't know if it was Farm Aid. I feel like it was something else.
Oh.
But Willie's farm adjacent always. So I guess, I don't know. Either way, this is a very jealous story that she ended up on the bus and got to smoke a little. And
very cool.
Yeah, much cooler than me standing on side of the stage.
I'm sure he would have allowed you on to smoke too. You should have just made it up.
Yeah, I didn't want to be pushy. No, but love him to death.
Well, we've kept you here long enough. Tom, thanks for doing this, man.
Yes, thank you so much. You're one of my favorite comedians, and I feel honored to talk to you for a while. Thank you.
Oh, thanks. I can't wait to meet you in person. I think there is something Nashville coming up in the next year. I know. I'm not sure exactly when, but we'll keep in touch for sure.
Okay.
Well, thanks. This was really fun.
Again, man, thanks for being cool. And it's nice to know that there are people of your stature that don't mind talking to a couple
y'all
of chumps.
Fucking cool.
Yeah.
No, you're the coolest. You're cool.
Right on. Well, thanks, Tom. We'll be in touch, man. Next time you come to Nashville, we'll hook up.
We all see each other as 20% cooler.
That's right. We are. See each other as 20% cooler.
Yeah.
I think you're 20% cooler than you think you are.
I love that.
Thanks, Tom.
He's my favorite comedian.
Of course. Great guy, though. What a fun hang Tom Papa is.
I know, and I really hope that we get to try his bread sometime.
Well, hopefully so.
And we get a yeast starter.
He says he's coming through Nashville, so maybe he'll bring us some bread.
We're going to hang out.
Anyway, thanks for tuning in this week. Every Wednesday, we got a new episode.
Yes, stay tuned. And next week, we'll have another fabulous comedian.
Like, subscribe, share, rate, all that good stuff.
Tell your friends and enjoy your groceries.
I know your mama's name.
Free Britney. Don't be an asshole.